Hello and welcome to Africa Speaks. Now, it has been a news-filled week, and of course we saw the intense trial of Oscar Pistorius, and we also did see the fact that the trial was getting intense. South Africa nearing the polls as well, with the opposition coming hard on the African National Congress. We also saw Rwanda commemorating 20 years after the genocide of 1994, and Kenya's First Lady, Margaret Kenyatta, turned 50 just this week, and she's meant to take part in this year's London Marathon as part of her Beyond Zero campaign that seeks to reduce maternal deaths and also child mortality in Kenya. And so we're looking forward to seeing all of that happen, and also how she's going to perform at the London Marathon. Welcome to Africa Speaks. Now, many times the world tends to care less about people with special needs, and with technology changing fast and information going digital, it's becoming more and more important that those with visual impairment are not left behind. On Web City, we tell a story of a website screen reader that enables the visually impaired. Get a description of the information uploaded online. Take a look.
Nelson Otieno, a 17-year-old Form 3 student at Thika School for the Blind. Despite his visual impairment, he can access the internet using an audio-enabled non-visual desktop access screen reader, the first of its kind in Kenya.
Without that software, we are actually computer blank. We cannot proceed anymore without this software, because you won't know whatever you are working with.
The screen reading software enabled on the Safaricom website, for instance, allows people with visual impairment to have a clear description of information uploaded on websites like text, images and sound.
So we said, okay, if we can build this website to talk to the visually impaired youth. So we took a 13-year-old visually impaired child and said, this is our benchmark. If this child can access this website, navigate it and make sense of the information, then we have achieved our objective. It's taken us 1 year to get to that point.
For images, you have put an image of maybe a Maasai guy with a font. A person who can actually see will see that, you get the visuals. But for a blind person, that not be able to, to do that. So one of the ways that we will do that is that you put a description of the image as an alt tag or as a title for the image. So as the screen reader reads, it's able to say there's an image here and gives a brief description of what that image is supposed to do.
I think there is a picture of a Maasai man dressed in his regalious millings.
Otieno says being visually impaired often limits choice of career for many who have the same challenge as his. But there is little attention paid to providing facilities that accommodate the needs of those interested in using new technology.
The government, now besides supplying the standard 1 children with laptops, they should also remember us people with visual impairment and empower us technologically.
Currently, this is available on only one site in Kenya, but the challenge is for many more firms to follow the same route to accord the visually impaired the access to information on the internet. Joy Doreen Bira, KTN, Africa Speaks.
Now, blood was spilled across the 1,000 hills of Rwanda that cast a dark blot on our collective humanity. Around 800,000 people were killed in 1994. That was in July. Now, the murderous rampage that became known as the Rwandan genocide began 100 days earlier. That was back in 1994. And we really seem to have learned quite a bit, but we seem to have also forgotten quite a lot. And that was another historical atrocity that we ritually mourn and also fetishize while we continue to repeat it in slightly altered ways in hauntingly similar context. And in this case, we'll refer to cases like what happened in South Sudan and also other African countries like the Central African Republic. But let's just remember what happened in 1994.
click, we share some of the images from Rwanda and the rest of the world about Rwanda in 1994, that is during the genocide. We learn from the past, reconcile for future generations. Amnesty International tweets, let us not forget those that died in the Rwanda genocide. We must not allow history to repeat itself. At Marco Dento tweets, children born of rape, the forgotten victims of Rwanda's genocide. At Democracy Now! Shares a picture of mass graves 20 years ago, and 20 years later, Rwanda commemorates what the world ignored 2 decades ago.
Now, in 2013, Rwanda was listed one of the top 10 places to open a business, and the World Bank, for its part, said that after Mauritius, Rwanda was the second friendliest place to conduct business in Africa. Kigali is also a bustling city, and it is also unusually clean. Well, those are some of the good things, positive things that you can say about Rwanda today. And now, of course, it's that time where we get into our discussion. And last week, we asked, why is it difficult for some African migrants to return home despite unpleasant conditions that they live in? And today, we explore what should we be aware of before making up our minds to pursue the Diaspora Dream. And in studio, I got Maureen Agena, who is a Ugandan, but working in Kenya. And she's also studied in Canada and worked in the Netherlands, and she's going to be giving us her experience. Currently, she is working for World Bank in online communication. And we also have Evelyn Gasheri, who is a literature and culture student back from Italy after 6 years. And also on Skype, we got Susanne Poulsen from Denmark to give an insight as well on whether or not life on the other side is as rosy as it is deemed. And so we're going to have quite a discussion. Also, we're going to have Al Kags and Javi Suzi, who are going to be giving us their views in regard to what we need to know before making up our minds to pursue or chase the Diaspora Dream. Now, I'll start with Maureen. Maureen, tell us about your experience in Canada, in the Netherlands. You studied in Canada and worked in Netherlands. Tell us about that experience.
Well, thank you, Joy, for having me on the show. I must say that my study in Canada was an initiative by the Canadian government. I was given a scholarship by the Commonwealth. It was a Commonwealth scholarship, but from the Canadian government.
Right.
And it was part of my Masters of Science degree. And I mean, it just came in. I tried to look for scholarships initially, and when it came in, it was just like a dream answered. So I went to Canada for an exchange program. I must say the experience was good, obviously, because my expenses were catered for, everything was paid for, everything was almost obvious, save for the cultural shock, you know, from tropics to winter. It was quite hard. But the experience was, I learned so much. The education system was totally different from here, and it was very beneficial. But then for the Netherlands, I went to work, and I was working with the Technical Center for Agriculture and Rural Corporations, managing Web 2 for development projects.
Right.
The experience was different. It was quite tough because I had to understand the Dutch culture. You know, they have all these programs of integration. You have to learn how to speak, how to communicate, the different cultural practices. But yeah, still also Netherlands, it wasn't bad because it was a planned thing. I knew I was going to work, I was going for a job.
Right.
And yeah, it was good for me.
All right, and I'll come to Evelyn. Evelyn has been in Italy for about 6 years as well. What was your experience going through school before I can even get further to ask you any more questions?
Thank you very much for inviting me, Joy. Yes, as you said, I was in Italy for 6 years. I went there, it was a childhood dream.
What part of Italy were you?
I was in Siena. Yes, I lived there. Like I told you, it was a childhood dream. I used to love Italy way back when I was a kid, and I said one day I'll take myself to Italy. Nobody took me.
You took yourself.
I took myself. Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. And I said that I went to Italy, I didn't have money. I went there with 20,000 Kenyan shillings. and I'm a lucky person because being abroad without knowing anybody.
So how did you survive with 20,000 Kenya shillings or worth of Kenya shillings?
Well, I pray a lot. I believe a lot, and I believe in miracles, because the first day I arrived in Italy, I was welcomed by a certain guy. I didn't know him. I met him at the stage. I was waiting for the bus to the town because I needed to know where the school was. I went there because I wanted to learn Italian. And so I was waiting for the bus, and then this certain guy stopped and asked me, he was black. He asked me, where are you going to? Well, I was 50-50. I didn't want to talk to this stranger. I didn't know who he was. But one heart told me, okay, Evelyn, you know your problems, talk to this guy. So I talked to this guy, and fortunately he was from Ghana and a footballer. He was playing for AC Siena, and from then that's where now everything, my doors
started to open up.
Yes.
Great. Maureen, if I get back to you, from your experience studying in Canada, you were given a scholarship, but the people who go out there, just like Evelyn went to Italy, and their experience is really tough. You go there, you don't have enough money, you don't have probably proper accommodation, and we have some images as well from Italy. Those of them that you're seeing on the screen are some of the images of the living conditions that people have to go through. Those images are actually from Italy, that is in Siena, Italy, yeah. And if you look at those images, the bed is not comfortable, the rooms they're living in are not comfortable. And so we're asking, what do we need to know before we make up our minds to pursue the diaspora dream? Do you speak the language of that country that you're going to? Maureen, if I would get back to you.
Yeah.
Compare the fact that you had a scholarship and the fact that there's some people who are out there who have to struggle every day to get food, to get money, to get just anything to live by.
Yeah, I think there are so many factors that come into play because there is this notion when you're here in Africa, okay, I wouldn't want to talk on behalf of all African countries, but for the countries I've been to, there's this perception that when you go to the West, actually when people are looking at the diaspora, they're looking at Europe, America, and all that, you think it's a good life. Maybe because of the series, the movies people watch, they portray some kind of good life, but the reality is different. Because if I take an example of Netherlands, for Canada it was school, and it was just like a planned thing. But for Netherlands, I had to interact, to engage, and there's so many tough conditions that when you go, first you have to learn the language, you have to learn how to speak Dutch. And there is an integration course they prepare, I think it's about 6 months. And of course, even when you learn to speak Dutch, you won't speak it like the Dutch people. So that means you can't get certain jobs because you can't communicate in that language.
Right.
And then of course there are different cultural aspects. For instance, I like to use this example. Most of us here in the African setting, when you're talking to someone and you look directly in their eyes, it's, an insult or disrespectful. The other side, when you don't look straight into someone's eyes,
it's disrespectful.
You're fishy. Actually, they think you're a thief or something. So understanding all these cultural differences and getting integrated into the system is very harsh. And like you said, it's very true that people go there and find something totally different from what they expected. Because unlike here, the cost of living is extremely high there. We know our currencies and the differences. So you have to understand how to survive, actually. And I think that's why so many times when you go as an African and you're working and you meet fellow Africans and you're talking to them and they're doing, shady work, they try to avoid you. They don't want to express themselves. They don't want to tell you what they're doing. They don't want to tell you why they went.
They don't want to come back.
They're actually not proud. They don't have papers. They don't want to come back when their stay expires in a certain country. For instance, in Europe, if you have a Schengen visa, you just go to the next country and start chasing for papers. And at the end of it, it's not worth it.
Well,
yeah.
All right, now let's connect to Susan Poulsen, who is a Danish citizen, but she's currently in Uganda is it a work mission? Yes, if I got that right. Well, Susan, thank you so much for joining us live via Skype. Now, I would like to know from you, we've seen a number of African migrants, going all the way to Denmark as well, in search of greener pastures. But is life out there as rosy as it is deemed down here?
I wish I could say yes, but it is definitely not. So why don't I take the example of the ladies? Now even here, as I'm here in Uganda, I see them all over the place. These beautiful young ladies now dating older white men, and of course they love it because they may benefit. They get better dresses, bags, cosmetics, whatever. And once they come to Denmark, they are going to have a shop. I know personally a number. There was this Tanzanian woman. She married a Danish man, and they're very much in love. Everything was nice. They come to Denmark. She ends up sitting alone in the apartment. She doesn't get easily a job. She doesn't speak the language. It's very difficult language to learn, and even at times she had to pay for it herself. So that was tough. She didn't later get a job. So what's happening? She started going to bars, drinking, going out with dubious men. So all of it ended up in a divorce.
Right. And I would also like to know from you, when it comes to issues to do with acclimatizing to the environment, and yourself, you know, coming from Denmark to Uganda and back to Denmark, and I'm sure you've seen African migrants as well, going out there and they cannot speak Danish. So how hard does this experience get? Well,
I would say the first time I came to Africa, that was in 1994, 20 years ago. Because actually I came to Nairobi. And even if I am a pretty well educated lady, it was a shock to me. All of a sudden, I was an outsider, the only white among many, many black people. And of course, I after 20 years now, I get accustomed. But what it taught me was how would it be to be an outsider in our part of the world, where everybody seems to take for granted that life is like the white life. And that made me have a bigger heart, actually, for African immigrants in our part of the world. When I see the way they are being marginalized, they are those who get the lowest paid job, as cleaners or toilet escaris, like that. I really feel sorry.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, Suzanne. Now let's just hear some of the views that are coming through from some of our viewers right here. Some of the tweets that I'm seeing. Duncan Ondimu is saying, I was in Uganda for 12 years and Uganda made me what I am. Well, that is on the African context. Now we're looking at life outside of Africa, and SVETS M1 is saying the diaspora dream is sold as the only way out of unemployment or greener pastures, which sometimes becomes a nightmare. And Wonderboy or Tony Kenyash is saying at least they haven't come back with accents, and that is for the two of you. And we're having Caleb Chauro, who is saying, if you believe and trust yourself, all is possible no matter where you are. And we also have Lewis Arisi, who is saying, well, you're tuned into the debate. And well, quite a number of views that are coming through here. Willie the Scosa is saying, all in all, I still think that if you can survive in Nairobi, you can hack anywhere in the diaspora. Let's take a look at some of the video comments that did come through.
What I can say is you really need to understand that you're going to work in a country where you probably know so little about the culture, and culture is very important to understand if you intend to work or live in any country. Now, what this means is you're probably going to be exposed to a lot of hardships which could affect you for the rest of your life. Of course, a lot of people go to the diaspora, get a good job, and get rich. Now, those are a few fortunate ones, I must say. But many people actually end up in these countries and they live on the streets. Now, what we see in movies or on TV is actually true. They have really nice infrastructure, and everybody would probably want to live in these kind of countries. But working there is another thing, and being able to have that kind of status that allows you to live and work in this country in a good way can be quite hard. So I must say that not all that glitters is gold. So if you intend to live and work in the diaspora, you need to be aware of the kinds of challenges that you're likely to face when you go there.
Thank you so much. That is Javi Sozi from Uganda, but who has also worked in so many other countries across the globe. I would actually call him a globe trotter. And if I might come back to you, ladies. Now, from what Susan has said, she has said quite a lot of things. The way African migrants are treated out there is not really as good as we might treat some of them when they come down to African nations. So what do you make out of all of that? Let me start with you, Ibrahim.
Well, what she's saying is true. And like we give first priority to foreigners, especially whites, when they come to our countries, and I believe everywhere in Africa, but that's not the case in Europe, and I must speak for Italy. The first time I went to Italy, I experienced some funny behaviors. Like every time an African gets inside a bus, you find that people, whites, are coming out of the bus because they don't want to be associated with this black person. I don't know if
that still happens today.
It does in some parts of Italy. It does, yes. So, and then at some point I started asking them, why are you treating us like this? I mean, when you come to Kenya, we treat you, we give you the first priorities. Why are you treating us this way? It's not fair. And they're like, they underestimate us. I must tell you the truth.
Right, Maureen?
Yeah, I must say, okay, well, it depends, but a lot of what she said is true. I'll give you an example of what I experienced one day when I went on a trip with a friend to Spain, and I went to one of the areas that has minority blacks. And I was staying at a hotel with her. She was a work colleague, and I remember one particular evening, there was so much movement around and people were going just to the beach, and most of the people who were getting out of the hotel were white people. So I think I was the only black person. And I remember the guard asked me, are you coming from this hotel? I said, yes. And he really wanted to confirm, but of course I'm so outspoken. I told him, why do you ask me that?
Is it because the hotel was posh? They didn't expect that you're black?
I think what I realized later, because I was so curious when that happened, and I told my colleague, I have to find out why. So when I moved out in the evening, I realized that majority of the people who were on the streets were blacks. Okay, mainly West Africans. I don't know why, for some reason. They were blacks, and they were in petty business, selling small things on the road, and screaming also, because when I was passing, they kept on shouting all sorts of words at me. And so I realized maybe somehow I couldn't blame these white people, because sometimes I think Africans call this onto themselves by the way they behave and the way they interact. But also it told me something that why do the blacks come out at night? There was something there was something to it. And another thing that you mentioned about the treatment, it's true that, and very unfortunate that when white people are here, Africans tend to, treat them, almost worship them. I mean, I go to a shop, I'm with a white person, I have money, I need a service, and the white person is being given preference. Not that I want to sound racist, I'm not, but these are realities. But on the contrary, the other side, I mean, no one cares.
No matter where you're from, you'll be served last if you're black.
No, you won't be served last. It's not always the case, but they don't give that preference. They don't show it like we do.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's also hear from Alkags. Alkags is an open data enthusiast, but he's also lived abroad for about 15 years. Let's hear what he has to say about what you need to know before you actually make up your mind to chase that diaspora dream.
Kenyans for a long time have wanted to go to, to live in America and to live in Europe, and especially for a long time. In the turn of the century, around 2000, 2003, what was interesting is that I think the American Embassy and the UK Embassy saw more than 20,000 applications every year of Kenyans wanting to go. And for a long time as well, they have wanted to, find any means to go by any means necessary. So they will lie at the embassy, they will forge papers, they will do what they need to go. Unfortunately, the life that they go and find when they get there is never the rosy picture that we see in the movies. And it's never the rosy picture that the Kenyans who are already there sort of tell us. When they're there, they show us pictures of themselves in nice places. They send us pictures of themselves with cars. And we assume that, because having a car here is a status symbol, then that must mean over there that, they're living the life. What they never tell us is the level of expenses that they have to deal with. Someone could be earning 300,000 shillings a month, no problem. But then you find that 150,000 shillings is going into rent, another 100,000 is going into, transportation and food and that sort of thing, and the rest they have to send home. So a lot of Kenyans, every time I travel, I found that a lot of Kenyans are not able to come back home. They are living very, very difficult lives because of the fact that, they sort of don't live for themselves, and it's almost like living in bondage.
Well, it's almost like they are living in bondage, and that is very true, because no matter where you are, I think sometimes it's always of the essence that you do some research before you think of going to a certain country. Know what languages are spoken there, what the culture is like, and what exactly you're going to do. If you're going to study, what do you need to know about the college that you're going to, or if you're going to work, what are the nitty-gritties that you need to get a hold of before you jump on that plane to fly out there and live in bondage. And well, let's hear finally from Suzanne. Suzanne, what are your final remarks to all of this, the diaspora dream, and also what people make their minds out of the Western world, or should I say the diaspora?
Yeah, thank you. That may take this opportunity to raise kind of a warning. Like in my country, we have now recently seen new immigration laws. Now, what are they saying? They are telling you that citizens of third world countries may get a visa and a work given that they belong to the following three categories. Now think about it. Well, it's and in three advanced.
Sorry about that, Susan. I think I'm losing a connection there. I can't quite get what you're saying. But let me now bring it over to the lovely ladies here. Maureen, what are your final remarks to all of this?
I think while we may need the good, easy life and, that is portrayed, like the gentleman said, I think it's important to understand our values. It's important to really know what we want, because like you mentioned, you're paying bills, you're spending all the little money you earn, and yet you could do much better if you stayed at home or if you stayed on the continent. And yesterday, if you were listening, the Vice President of the World Bank was saying they're seeing so many Africans in the diaspora coming back home to develop the continent. And I think it's very important, because many times people have told me, Maureen, why do you have to go back? I mean, you've gotten a scholarship, you've gotten a job, why do you have to go back to Africa? And I'm saying, why do I have to stay here? And that makes me agree with one of the people who sent something online and said, no matter where you are, you can, progress or succeed. So whether I'm in Kenya or I'm in Uganda or wherever, or in Canada, it's really up to an individual.
Right. Evelyn, what are your final remarks?
Yes, as Maureen has put it, I mean, I give an example of myself. And my friends from Nigeria, they told me, Evelyn, you've told us you want to go back to Kenya. I told them, yes. I came here for studies. I'm done with my studies. Well, I was working. I was one of the luckiest Kenyans to find a white-collar job. I was working in our office in a football club. And I told them, guys, I'm leaving my job. I want to go back to Kenya. And they were asking me, why do you want to go back to Africa? And I told them, guys, look, you've been here. You've done master's, PhD, but I can see you working in supermarkets. You're washing toilets. You're washing banks, and you don't have a white-collar job. Whereas back at home, you could be a manager somewhere. Right. So I told them, my friends, I'm leaving. I don't care the difficulties I'm going to find at home, but at least I'm going back home. That's home.
Right.
Yes.
And east or west, home is best.
Home is best.
Well, let's try to reconnect to Suzanne, if she can get us a brief final remark as we wind up the show. Suzanne?
Yeah, I think I was interrupted, but what I was about to say is that the immigration laws have been tightened so that it's only business people, researchers, and sports stars whom the Danish society think could help in terms of growth and incorporate business. Another thing is that if you are a student and you go and study there, and you graduate from there, you have a right to stay 6 months to look for a job. If you don't get out. That's the harsh message.
All right, thank you so much, Suzanne. And she says the immigration laws have now been tightened abroad. So it's getting more and more difficult for you who is out there living without papers to even make your way around. You know, you either wake up in the night, and that is when you're actually living your day, and you're not really living under the best of conditions. So those are some of the things probably you need to get a hold of. The conversation continues online under the hashtag the Diaspora Dream or Diaspora Dream, and we would be glad to hear more of your reactions. And also you can send us an email, africaspeaks@standardmedia.co.ke. On the show today we had Suzanne Poulsen, who is a Danish citizen, was joining us to give us an insight on some of the stereotypes that we do have when we're going abroad or trying to find work and study abroad. And also we had Maureen Agena, who is working with online communication of the World Bank, giving us an insight on what it's like to live life in Canada and the Netherlands. And we also had Evelyn Gasheri, who is back from Italy after 6 years, and she's got a lot of expertise when it comes to literature and culture. And also she has helped, you know, to bring back or help some of the exploited Kenyan athletes who are living in Italy, which is a very good thing. Thank you all for joining us on the show, and also to our contributors, Javi Sozi from Uganda and Al Kags as well from Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition, and we'll continue the conversation online. I'm Joy Doreen Bira. Let's keep in touch.